before.
Did you hear it?
I can hear it.
Hartford Public Schools Board of Education for Wednesday, September 9th, 2021. And I'd like to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Ms. Aronson,
Present.
Dr. Chang,
Present.
Ms. Poulon, Dr. Steinberg,
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson,
Here.
Ms. Wilcox,
Here.
Mr. Zdanowicz,
Here.
Student Representatives Andrew Maglio,
Present.
Student Representative Avery Wood Weber.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Andrew, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order. I don't believe we have any student participation this evening. Anyone correct me if I'm wrong here? No? Okay. So we will move on to public communications. Typically, we do have the public speak from the podium, but I believe we're having difficulty with that microphone. So when I call you to come up to speak, you can come up to the table and choose any of the microphones there. And I'm going to go based in the order in which you signed up. Marina Creed. So you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please start by stating your name and address for the record. Thanks for joining us.
Button. Okay. Is that better? Yes. Okay, great. Okay. So my name is Marina Creed. I live at 87 Outlook Avenue, West Hartford, right across over there. So good evening. My name is Marina Creed. I'm a faculty member at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine and a neuroimmunology nurse practitioner at UConn Health, where I treat immunosuppressed people at the Comprehensive MS Center. I have published papers about SARS-CoV-2, and I have been privileged to lead movements to protect the most vulnerable Connecticut residents against COVID-19, including many here in West Hartford. I'm also a mother of 2 and the proud parent of a West Hartford public school student at Bugby Elementary. I'm here tonight representing myself and my family, medically vulnerable members of our West Hartford public school community, and the parents in our town who believe in the power and innovation of a West Hartford education. Time and again, this community, under your leadership, has risen above and beyond to give our students every opportunity to succeed academically, socially, and emotionally. During the pandemic, you've also protected their public health and, by extension, the health of our entire town based on the latest science and recommendations by public health experts. Tonight, I ask you to continue leading the charge to keep our children and the community safe as possible, and to ensure that in-person school proceeds with as few interruptions or health implications as possible, especially in the face of the Delta variant and the additional variants following closely behind. I implore you to conduct comprehensive audits of ventilation systems in all classrooms when they are fully occupied to be sure that they are effective and equitable. And building upon that, to take immediate and decisive action to increase ventilation and air quality in our schools to help prevent school-acquired COVID infection with one of 3 actions. Number 1, bring HEPA filters into all classrooms and common spaces. These turnkey portable units, which use less electricity than a portable air conditioner, have been shown by the CDC to reduce SARS-CoV-2 transmission by 65% and only require a standard electrical outlet. These units are recommended even for those classrooms that meet current ventilation standards by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Harvard University, and many others. The science is clear. HEPA filters are a crucial intervention that significantly reduce disease transmission of COVID-19 and other viruses. Number 2, instead of or in addition to HEPA filters, West Hartford Public School puts Corsi boxes in all classrooms and common spaces. These simple, effective, energy-efficient units, pioneered by Dr. Richard Corsi of UC Davis, are effective tools for keeping transmission lower indoors, only require the electricity needed for a light bulb, and cost less than $80 per unit.
I need to ask you to wrap up. I'm so sorry.
Okay. I'm currently exploring a collaboration with the UConn School of Public Health and Engineering to produce them for the Connecticut school districts. West Hartford could be on the leading edge of this partnership with our state's preeminent public university. Number 3, if you cannot lead with either of these interventions, we beseech you to allow parents and PTAs to donate either HEPA-approved filtration boxes, HEPA filtration units or Corsi boxes to classrooms and common spaces. We have assembled a committee of motivated parents, clinicians, scientists, engineers, and community members. Okay. That's it. We look forward to further discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Matt Downey. I should have indicated this earlier, my apologies. You can check over towards where our clerks are sitting while you're speaking, and they'll hold up a yellow card when you have about a minute left, and then a red card when your time is up.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Downey. I live at 140 Webster Hill Boulevard, and I'm a first grade teacher at Morley Elementary. Before I read the rest of my statement, I'd like to make a few things clear. First, I am not here in my capacity as a teacher, but as a concerned citizen. Second, and I'm aware this message may be misinterpreted, but I am not here in any capacity as pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. I'm sure the points I will highlight are being actively addressed and discussed by our leaders because they, like me, are here first and foremost for the students that we serve. I simply feel the need to make this statement as a citizen. You may know September is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, so I'd like to share a few points. First, 1 in 4 will encounter some type of clinical anxiety or depression in their teen years. Second, major life disruptions, such as the upheaval caused by this pandemic, can lead to suicidal ideations. Third, there are 3 states of mind that contribute most directly to suicide: a feeling of helplessness, a feeling of isolation, and the feeling of being a burden. Isolation and helplessness are ingrained in a pandemic way of life. Society has implied that those who are vaccine hesitant are a burden. How do our young people rationalize this toxic societal mindset against the years of stand up to bullying and be wary of peer pressure messages that we teach and that dedicated and compassionate middle and high school teachers like myself teach every day? I have a quote. Have you noticed how strikingly similar both the mindsets and the actions are between the suicide bombers at Kabul's airport and the anti-mask and anti-vax people here? That is from the National Secretary of Education from 2009 to 2016. What if one of our students has a parent in the military? How can we possibly expect young people to practice critical thinking and self-advocacy when this is the type of binary mindset they face from some of the nation's most influential leaders? I want to make it very clear I do not want to be here today. Frankly, I'm tremendously uncomfortable, as my shaking hands would probably indicate. And I'm aware of the possibility that my message will be twisted and misinterpreted. Those who know me know I live only to improve the lives of those around me, and I feel sick at the proposition that I may be labeled as something other than what I truly am. But my character right now and my integrity is more important than my personal comfort, because without integrity, I have no comfort. I've dedicated my life to this town. I went to school here, bought a house here, I coach here, and I teach here. My life is this town, and I'm simply trying to stand up for what I believe for some of our most vulnerable citizens. If not me, then who? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Alexandra Bonani. Alexandra Bonani.
Do I press this button? Oh, it's on, okay. Dear members of Board of Education, thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes to share my opinion regarding continuation of mask mandate in West Hartford Public Schools. I would greatly appreciate if you could please comment and answer my questions during this session or in a follow-up session. I understand that our state has not lifted the emergency declaration yet. I am truly hopeful that by the end of September, we will be in position to reconsider mask mandates for the children and create a health protocol that makes everyone comfortable. One thing I realize that we've been into the pandemic for more than 18 months now, and there has not been one cluster randomized study conducted that would prove effectiveness of masks in K-12 schools. I am aware of one study with inconclusive results. Should that not make us all think that there's really no benefit of the children to be wearing masks for more than 400 minutes a day, with a break for a snack and lunch plus recess? Early childhood is a very crucial period when children develop cultural, language, and social skills. That includes the ability to detect emotion on other people's faces. Social interactions with friends, parents, and caregivers are integral to fostering children's growth and well-being.
we are depriving them from that by covering their faces and socially distancing them. So Connecticut placed a mask mandate for everyone 3 years of age and older. Massachusetts has a mask mandate for everyone 5 years of age or older. Is there an uptick in hospitalizations and deaths for children between 3 and 5 in Massachusetts? No. Is the transmission rate of the virus higher among 4-year-olds than 5-year-olds? No. Then why 3-year-olds in Connecticut have to wear masks? Based on what data was that mandate created? The World Health Organization does not recommend that children 12 and younger wear masks. Specifically, the advice is against masking 5-year-olds and younger. Most of the European countries follow WHO, and children 12 and younger are not required to cover faces. Why don't we? Going back to West Hartford schools, could you please share with us timelines and the plan for this academic year with respect to masks? What requirements need to be met in order for the mandate to be lifted? Knowing the goals would put at ease many of us. At the same time, I would appreciate it if any future decisions are supported by data. For many of us, hearing that West Hartford public schools are following guidelines, either CDC or AAP, is simply not enough. I greatly appreciate your time, and I look forward to hearing your answers. And I apologize, I forgot to say my name. My name is Alexandra Banasik. I'm a mother of 3 children, ages 3, 7, and 9, and they all go to West Hartford Public Schools.
Thank you. And can you state your address for the record as well, please?
Yes, it's 329 Cumberland Road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have D. Poli. That's all that's written here. I'm not quite sure who that is. 94 Park Road. Is that helpful? Okay. Is there anyone else, any other members of the public who wish to speak? Come on up. You can state your name and address for the record.
Jean Wiggin, 6 Middlebrook Road.
Could you do that one more time in front of the microphone? Thank you.
Jean Wiggin, 6 Middlebrook Road. Thank you all for allowing us to speak today. Most of us here tonight are parents. We care deeply for our children and all of the children of West Hartford. We have reasonable expectations of public health in our school system. We expect as public health risks rise in our schools that they will be weighed. We expect that viruses posing the same level of risk will be treated as such. When COVID hit last year, public health and administrators didn't know the impact to children. It was minimal. Administrators took drastic measures to ensure our children were safe, such as virtual learning, social distancing, and mask mandates, and for that we are grateful. 18 months later, we do have the data. The data shows that COVID and the flu pose a similar risk to school children, and the risk is mild. The data shows that pediatric flu hospitalizations and COVID hospitalizations are equivalent. Additionally, 40 to 45% of pediatric COVID hospitalizations are actually for other illnesses. All pediatric deaths are tragic, but it was important to look at the data. Pediatric flu and COVID deaths are comparable. There have been approximately 349 pediatric COVID deaths as of August, according to the CDC. By comparison, pediatric flu deaths average 650 a year. There are 73 million children in the United States. COVID does not present a significant risk to school children. Our children need to go back to a normal school experience. Mitigation protocols like distancing, hybrid models, classroom barriers, HEPA filters, and masks have shown to have no statistical benefit. They don't work. The UK guidance follows the data, which shows the benefits to children being in a normal school setting significantly outweigh the COVID risks. Students in the UK are not wearing masks except in isolated instances in the middle and high school. They were never required for elementary age children. In the UK, both political parties believe that face covers hinder children's ability to communicate, learn, and socialize. What is the process to get our children back to a normal school setting? What is the number of cases we have to hit before our kids can remove their masks? What is our goal? What is our end game? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to address the board this evening? Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure, thank you. Robert Kappas, 50 Maplewood. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I agree with what these folks have said about mask mandates and the harm to children, but I want to change the viewpoint a little bit on that argument. A parent is uniquely situated to understand their child, their child's concerns, their child's health, their child's mental status, their child's emotional status. What you've done is implement a policy that says, no, parents don't know best. We know best, you folks. And I think that's wrong. You don't know my child. You don't know if my child has suffered COVID and recovered. You don't know if my child has been vaccinated. You don't know the stress that my child is under mentally, emotionally, physically from wearing a mask all day. The person who's best able to make that decision of whether to wear a mask or not is a parent. And I urge you to reconsider masking these kids. It's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address the board? Okay. Come on forward.
Hi there, Erin McGinn, 1643 Boulevard.
I do have to ask you to keep your mask on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm just wondering how many of you went out to dinner this weekend and sat down without a mask and enjoyed a meal. I'm wondering how many of you went to a baseball game this summer, went to a football game last summer, went to a concert, or went to the fish show, perhaps, this past weekend. Wearing a mask is absurd. The data does not support it. I have not seen one study demonstrating its usefulness or its benefit. And as a large district, you have an obligation to our students and to our teachers to go to Lamont and to make a case to stop the insanity. We are a smart public. We are 80% vaccinated, if not higher. We're having vaccination clinics at our schools. It is time for the masks to come off. They are useless, and they are detrimental to children learning to read, to children learning social and emotional cues. They are detrimental to students that are suffering from depression and anxiety. I have seen it firsthand. My daughter is a mess, and I have been in program after program where these children are suffering. They cannot be made to suffer anymore. We need to be adults in this school, in this state, in this country. We need to stand up for our children. They deserve a normal life where they can see people, where they can interact with their friends, and they need their teachers and their community to support that. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to address us this evening? If not, thank you very much for your participation. We will move on to unfinished business. We don't have any unfinished business. New business, there's no new business. Moving to staff communications and reports, we have a significant number of those, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Moore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. Very exciting time of year, obviously, and we are thrilled to have our kids back in session, to have all of our kids back. And over the next few weeks, we'll see reports based on not just scores from last year, but as things have gone on, what we've done educationally to welcome people back and to shift to in-person instruction completely in the district over the next few weeks. We'll be presenting those. So, before we get into the presentations by the members of the team, and you guys can come up now, and I'll be pinch hitting for Dr. Morrow, who is dropping his daughter off at college. This is another summer that was unfortunately busier than we thought we'd be, with health strategies, with mitigation strategies. Certainly the Delta variant presented many more challenges than we were hoping to have come forward at this time. So a lot of work was done this summer. Mitigation strategies, a lot of the things that we saw last year, that we saw continued this year. Ventilation systems, we've brought in outside engineering consultants. We were one of the first districts to do this. We've continued to do this. We've spent almost $200,000 on bringing in engineers, environmental engineers, to go through all of our buildings, make suggestions for each of our buildings to have the best ventilation system that we can, with the understanding that we're dealing with buildings that are between, other than Charter Oak, 50 and 100 years old. So doing everything we can with ventilation, strategizing with our principals, with cafeteria that are different in each building, and how we handle lunches in each building, in each location, and how we spread kids out, both in cafeteria and overflow spaces, and using outside spaces when possible. Masks. Certainly, there's universal masking is something that has been shown repeatedly to limit the spread of COVID. And that's something that we continue. There's a governor's mandate involved, but we have the obligation to do everything we can not to protect every individual child, but all 9,300 children within the district. And that's what went into that decision. And overall, the vast majority of parents have been supportive of that. In vaccination, and this is something that I think is really important to talk about because it is a dramatic success story for our district. When we look at vaccination rates for our kids, this has been a focus continuously. We had more vaccination clinics this week, today, as we go forward. We have more scheduled for September at the secondary schools. And that focus and continued communication this summer about the need and the importance of vaccination, that focus has certainly paid off, and I'm so thankful to our kids and the parents of the West Hartford community. I just went through today's data release by the state of Connecticut, and for children 12 to 17, West Hartford's children and our students are now 82% fully vaccinated, and 89.5% of all students have begun the process. To put in perspective where that Connecticut, West Hartford as a community is 78% fully vaccinated, but for our students, we have the 5th highest rate in the state. And if you take the 4 ahead of us, Westport, New Canaan, Darien, and Greenwich, and then West Hartford, there's not a district that looks like us that has the vaccination rate that we have. This is going to keep our kids in school. This is going to keep our kids engaged. This is going to keep our kids from spreading the disease in the same way that we see spread from those that aren't vaccinated. So I am deeply gratified to the parents of the community and to our students for taking this seriously and for going forward with vaccination. With that being said, now we look at our mission and how we go about preparing and inspiring all students. And as we tell you every year as we start this kind of physical upgrade of what we've done during the summers, we spend $5 million every summer, and a lot of it goes on things that people can't see. We had 2 major masonry projects this summer, repointing Hall and Sedgwick. Both, and you see this when you get heavy rains, where you'll see not just pitting on the outside, but you'll see at the lower levels of building, you'll get flooding in from the sides. We had significant masonry work done at Hall and Sedgwick. And the other big thing that you don't always see is the roof. And we had major roofing projects begin for portions of the Hall roof and the Sedgwick roof. And at Whiting Lane, we're continuing the process of the security office reconfigurations. As we've seen that building by building as we go through, and will be completed with the entire district soon. One of the things I'll say about planned facilities, one of the difficulties, is that everything's on back order. It was fortunate when this started. We did see ahead of time. We ordered picnic tables for outsides before other districts, and we got those in. We ordered shade structures that are going to go up eventually at all of our buildings. Everything's back ordered with things like that. We've ordered tents that we'd like to use pop-up times, occasionally larger tents, not your pop-up sports events tents, but more significant ones. Again, back ordered significantly. So we'll be seeing shifts as the year goes on, with even more strategies as we get more things come in that can help things out to make the outsides more a part of our schools, as we've seen over the past year, and has worked very successfully for classes to be outside when they can be at all levels. IT, a major investment, is a redundant internet workaround, basically, so that if any building loses internet, we have a redundant system so that those classes won't lose internet for the day. As we know now, we're in a different world. The internet goes down, that's going to affect lesson plans, that's going to affect what we're doing that day. So now, we don't have just one point of failure bringing down our schools that day. Also in IT, security cameras and rapid response. New technology in security cameras that allows more focusing, higher resolution, so we can pick more things up outside of buildings when things happen. And also these rapid response buttons, and work directly with the police department. We're upgrading that system also. Transportation, this year we're transporting at this point 5,392 students, makes us one of the largest transportation organizations in the state of Connecticut. I want to thank everybody in our transportation office. They do a great job trying to make sure this works. And I also want to thank First Student, because as we've seen, there are bus driver shortages, and they have prioritized hiring in West Hartford. We've had to do some double runs. We've had some people that are working multiple runs that wouldn't necessarily be, and hoping in the coming days, as we add more bus drivers, that will smooth out still. But overall, it's gone very well, in a very difficult time to find bus drivers. So I want to thank everybody from transportation. And I don't know if you want to stop and do questions with each presenter at each time, or if you want to go on to the next section. It's up to you.
I think stop and do questions.
Sure.
Yeah, partway through.
Sure.
So are there questions from board members? Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Internet redundancy, you talked about that. I know we've known some of the issues that happen. Does that also include higher security, so that penetration from outside doesn't exist? So
Yeah,
because I know we had issues.
Yeah,
everybody did.
We've invested in a couple different network systems, as well as a network administrator that oversees all of these cybersecurity issues. We are constantly under attack, as is every district, as is every municipal organization. Every day we get denial of service attacks that we work on. And fortunately, last year we had issues at the beginning of the year with that. We made modifications, I think probably October, November, you remember we talked about it. And since then, it hasn't happened. We've still had the attacks, but we've been able to even locate some of those attacks with the help of West Hartford Police and move forward with there. So things have been much better over the past 6 months or so in that area. But we know it's happening. Every single day, we're getting those attacks.
Other questions? Amanda?
Hi, I'm not sure, is the microphone working?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I know in the last storm, in the last couple of storms, we did well overall, with the exception of the little issue at Brayburn there, but do we have a strong sense of which buildings are most prone to flooding as we move forward?
Sure, we do. There's certainly King Philip over the years, just that area itself has a higher rate of flooding. King Philip, its lower levels, its basements certainly have been impacted by that over the years. Brayburn, that area, Jason, anytime you have only one way of egress kind of in and out, you're at the mercy of tree lines or anything else there, or that flooding area that happened by Brayburn. It's actually not typical at Brayburn over the years for that to happen. But yeah, we've looked at it, and Bob Palmer and his crew did great work making sure that things were buttoned down, because we really did not have damages from flooding at our buildings over time. I mean, some things with flooding that of course affect some things, but overall not the same levels of damage that we saw other places.
Other questions? I did have a question about the air filtration. Are we still doing the windows open when we can, doors open to the hallway, or doors closed? And how do we feel about the air ventilation in the classrooms?
So it's one of those things that there are recommendations that the Department of Public Health give. And then there's recommendations from outside. And then there's other recommendations from outside. And again, I'm not an engineer. And that's one of the things that I say to people. So people will often ask, why aren't the windows open in this building? And the fact is, because we've had in the engineers, they tell us that in that situation, the windows being open actually harm air circulation in the building because of the way the system's designed to work. There are some buildings without air conditioning, not to make it cool, but conditioning units that shift the air, that certainly you want windows open. We've worked to design how fans can work in there, how doors can be open in there. So we've looked at, it's like the cafeterias. Each building has a slightly different element. And so here's a kind of key with mitigation strategies and with COVID. This is just, I always, through this entire process, I've just wanted to be transparent about everything that we do and why. I've said from the beginning, we're going to have COVID cases in our buildings. There is no doubt about it. You're going to get letters from Dr. Morrow detailing we had these cases in this building because there's COVID cases in our community. Now, luckily and fortunately, those COVID cases have plateaued over the past couple weeks and even come down a little bit. But for the past 2 weeks, we've been sitting at about 60 cases a week, which means, West Hartford's 60,000 people, our schools are 10,000 people. So based on that, we're going to have between 10 and 15 cases a week, 10 and 20 cases a week, based on that spread. When you take into account also that kids under 12 are the only people that can't be vaccinated, so that's something where you're also going to see cases. So our concern is, how do we mitigate spread in the building? So we're constantly thinking about that kind of air filtration system. People want these up. I asked for these to be taken down, but I don't control this room. There's other things. These kind of plexiglass, we know they can actually harm airflow in places, okay? So there's all these systems. So we do not have 100% of every recommendation because we can't have that in every building. There's 5 things that the State Department of Public Health says you should try this, if possible. Most districts have done 1 or 2 of those things. We've done 4 of those 5 things. Now, over time, more availability comes in, more information comes in, or the Department of Public Health changes their recommendations of what we should do, then we'll do those things. But again, that's the kind of thing, like, I'm not diagnosing COVID. I'm making decisions based on the advice I get from the state and from state epidemiologists who, again, and this is something I want to stress to people, we meet twice a week with the state epidemiologists. We have phone calls twice a week. I have another one that was just called for tomorrow about mitigation strategies. I don't know if there'll be new advice put out by the state. So these are the things that we're always doing. We continue doing it throughout the summer. And, I think that realistically, we know that the keys are ventilation, big key. We know distancing as much as we can with masks. And we know keeping kids out of school when they're sick. And realistically, the biggest thing we can do is please don't send your kids to school when they're sick. I mean, the cases that we had the first week, when you think about it, that was an element of, well, we weren't sure. We didn't want our child to miss the first day, the second. No, you need to keep your child home if you have any doubt whatsoever. And if a test is pending, certainly you can't send your child in. So, a long answer, but hopefully that covered it.
You did, thank you. All right, let's move on.
Good evening, Paul Vicinus, Curriculum and Instruction. I want to begin by welcoming Avery and Andrew. It's a pleasure to have you at the table and a pleasure to report back to the board. Talk about curriculum and instruction readiness for school. As you saw in the report begins with continuity of services. And continuity of services, I think it was June 1st last school year when we presented several of us up here our reopening plan. And so as part of some of our federal grants, they call that the continuity of services plan. And it covered everything from how we were mitigating academic impacts of the pandemic, social, emotional, mental health impacts, strategies certainly to support equity, which has been ongoing work here in the district, and you'll hear more about from my colleague at my right. Health and safety, which you just heard a good piece about, and then of course family connections and staff development and professional learning. So we provided we gave you a report on that, but we provided also to the State Department of Education a detailed plan in terms of additional funding and grants that we have to support all of those things as just the nature of what we do. I'm pleased to report updates on that as of part of our piece was to survey our staff, and we had nearly 90% satisfaction with what we were identifying as priorities, which goes a long way, and it really speaks to the transparency that Tom talks about, that we try to share what's going on. And in the report itself, you saw a number of factors within that continuity service plan that were already enacted over the summer, things that make sense. Hiring of the new staff and the positions that you supported, such as some of the coaching, additional social workers, additional special education teachers, etc. The outfitting of our additional pre-K classrooms and other facility improvements. So we're very excited about that. And to Tom's point earlier, in terms of pending reports this year, we'll have reports where we talk about, hey, how's the impact of that mathematics coaching? That'll be something that we put onto the board calendar as a little time has passed. It allowed us to mature in that and give you a responsible update. Computer science workspace, I believe you heard about that in the budget presentation last year. Our involvement with the CREC teacher and residency program. So these are things that I'm certain you'll hear more about coming. But what really happened, the bulk of the work kind of stemmed around summer curriculum writing, summer programming, which is kind of summer school type programs, and the school-based activities, especially those to welcome back our remote students, which was a priority that you identified for us. So I'm not going to obviously read you the report, but just to highlight some of the pieces within summer curriculum writing specifically as it supports board initiatives. We had teams, we were so excited to welcome teams back to be able to do this work. We did significant writing at all levels, K through 12, relative to our social emotional learning and our continued efforts with that, relative to our work within equity and inclusion, and you'll hear more on that. You may be aware that there's academic impacts, new legislation that was passed in terms of the inclusion of a closer study of Indigenous peoples. This has been something near and dear to the West Hartford community for some time, and we had work begun on that at the elementary level, which is actually well ahead of the time frame in terms of when the state wants to see it. We had work within our Mastery Experience program and the graduation credits that you've heard about in past reports. And we also had, other routine academic work. But one thing that I'll just sort of highlight and tease is some work in our mathematics, secondary mathematics curriculum that has to do with how we want to make some shifts to align that curriculum, in terms of the sequencing of courses, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, to better align with the SAT and some other things. And that's a report that's also a more detailed report just on those changes that'll be forthcoming this year at some point. In terms of our summer programming, you saw there we serviced approximately 400 elementary age students between our Summer Connections program, which was expanded from just being a Charter Oak and Smith program to being open to the entire district. We had some expanded options within our ESOL summer prep program where for those families that could not attend due to childcare issues, we were able to offer them some remote learning. The HANIC program kind of had a very short open and close at servicing approximately 40 students from the Hillcrest neighborhood. The real big changer in our summer programming was the establishment, the design, development, and implementation of a middle school summer program. We had approximately 125 students join us, and really that was a blend of academic some academic remediation and reinforcement, in addition to some really specific activities directed at school engagement. So we had these enrichment opportunities that spanned any number of things. And we took that lesson and we built it into our Summer Connections as well. So I'm sure as you saw in the report, there were opportunities at both of those levels for some coding experiences. There were some arts experiences that happened. And that's in addition to, I believe, if you saw some of the other enrichment programs, we had just under 400 students that were involved in some shorter 1 week, 2 week arts programs, typically around the music. Our high school programs, big changes there, where we were affording the opportunity free of charge to students that needed it to repeat for credit. And then obviously, if you weren't repeating for credit, if you had financial need, there's always opportunities to apply for scholarships. We had, lost the number, but approximately 575 students this summer in that, and there was a blend of in-person classes, primarily for remediation and recovery of credit, and there were also remote and afternoon or early evening classes, more targeted towards the get-ahead type stuff. And we figured those were the environments that we expected. If you're trying to recover credit, well, we're not going to give you just kind of more of online. We want to see you in person. We want to be able to help you in that way. So some of our decisions were thoughtful in that regard. You read in there some exciting stuff on our National External Diploma Program. We're extremely excited to have supported individuals seeking that high school diploma equivalency, as well as our English Language Learner Program. And so happy to take questions that you have on our summer programming, and very briefly just the professional learning opportunities really aligned to your district goals. So as you know, we've had computer science. We had to kind of take it on the back burner during COVID, but we're excited to bring that forward and starting really in small, responsible pace as we deal with any number of priorities coming out of the pandemic. Had ongoing professional development this summer relating to equity advancement. The vision of the graduate relates to the mastery experience, and then some work with coaching, especially as that relates to us onboarding our coaching. Final note, we did welcome approximately 375 families from the remote experience back into our schools with specialized kind of opportunities for them to have tours, to meet the principals, to engage a little bit. Every report I've had from principals as we've visited schools in the first week have been excitement, real positive vibes from those students who have come back, how they've been welcomed, and thus far everything seems to be going very smoothly. So pending your questions.
Thank you. Questions from members of the board? Lorna?
Thank you very much for the update. Just want to clarify in terms of the Summer Connections, was it 400 students that were part of it, or 205.
No, I apologize. I was summing up kind of all of the elementary children together with the 400. So it was 200 for Summer Connections itself, about 135 in the ESOL prep, and another 40 or so in the HANIC program for a total of 400.
Still wonderful. Wonderful to hear that number. Good. Thank you. Oh, I was saying one.
No, it's on.
It's on. Oh my. Wonderful. Thank you.
Jason?
Okay, thank you for that report. And, really enjoyed reading these reports because the last time we had a meeting, it was about your plan for reopening and the plan that you had for the summer work. And seeing all of the work that you put into opening the schools again, the continuity of service, and bringing families that were in remote learning back into the school system is an enormous task. And I know that just these couple pages don't reflect the months of work that you all have done, and just incredibly grateful for the thoughtfulness and the sensitivity to different conditions, the variety of programs that we have available. It's really impressive, and just thank you for the work that you've done in bringing the schools back.
Thanks, Jason. And I just want to take that opportunity to give a shout out to all the teachers involved in these summer programs. We know last year was such a monumental and difficult year on so many different fronts, and that was always a concern. And so many of our dedicated teachers just worked so diligently throughout the year. And then additionally, those who stepped up over the summer and create, very creative solutions, new programs that they were doing, refining their programs, and it cuts across. I know, I'm sure that Melissa will say the same thing of her special educators. So I just want to throw a big giant thank you out to all of our staff out there for everything that they've given and continue to give.
I'm glad you asked the question. I'm glad you answered that way, Paul, because I do know of districts that had plans for summer programs and couldn't get the staffing to run the plans. So either ran it abridged or weren't able to run programs, and we had no vacancies. We were able to get people in, and they were ready to come in and spend time during their summer with their kids, and it was needed, and it was very important work. So thanks to them.
Anyone else? Amanda?
Thank you for all the detail that you put into our report. And one of the things that I was really taken by is how many of our community partners supported this, in addition to all of our staff and our faculty. And that is greatly appreciated for those who are listening and will continue to be needed. So thank you to all of them. And when you put together something as robust as this for the summer, I know part of the hope was to make sure that we had that level of engagement with the kids. And at the end of the summer, especially with the way that you added all that middle school support, what's your sense kind of at elementary, middle, and high school of the amount of kids we still need to work to get either physically back in school if they're not attending, or who really need that engagement? This was a huge support to that effort, but where are we with any kids that we need to make sure we have hold of?
Sure. So engagement, it's funny because that was one of the big priorities we talked about at the beginning of the year with all the administrators, is how do we make sure that we're hooking children? How do we make sure that they're fully engaged right from the get-go? I would say even I would have loved to have seen in our middle school programs if we could have doubled the number that we saw this summer. I'm going to leave it to Liz to talk about first day enrollments, but we feel good just relative to attendance and participation and getting kids back. We have kids back in our schools, but in terms of how well are they re-engaging and readjusting? Right now, the initial reports when we're going around to schools and we're talking, it's very positive right now. I think we're definitely in that honeymoon period at the beginning of school. People are back. They're excited to see their friends. They're engaged in the class. we know that over the next month or so, we're going to start to hit and we're going to start to identify those kids that are going to have a little bit of a harder time. It was interesting. It was a topic we had 2 different principal meetings today, elementary and secondary in it. And we were talking about our vision of the graduate at the secondary meeting, and we're talking about determination and self-efficacy, and the idea that there are going to be children in our schools for whom it's just a challenge. They just have some learning loss. They maybe have some of those feelings, and how are we supporting them? And we have to be paying attention, and it kind of goes back to, we have to be paying attention to those pieces and the social emotional pieces equally with academics. But we need those 2 things to be working in concert, and they don't work against each other. If we don't set those conditions up, then the students can't learn academically. But if we're not challenging the students academically, then they can't make that growth and feel positive about themselves. So I would say, long answer short, we're kind of in that honeymoon period, and we'll continue to monitor that, and happy to talk to you about that throughout the year. But right now we're feeling pretty good about how we have everyone back.
Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to circle back, if you don't mind, because one of the things I forgot to ask is about, maybe Tom, about the deployed loaner Chromebooks and iPads, hotspots and families. I know, is that, one is, we had a tremendous amount of our computer assets out there last year because how did we get those back? And then are these, I guess really the crux of this question is, are these just a matter of it's a new school year and we're putting them out there, or are we finding that those families and needs is a greater number because of COVID? Or I guess a couple questions in there.
No, it's good, and I should have addressed it more specifically. So over the summer we tried to, because basically all the classroom sets last year were kind of broken apart and sent out to kids. We did a great job of getting them back. Some of them are at end of life anyway, or coming into that time. We do basically have, not a tracker, but basically it's like find your iPhone where you know where it is. Well, we basically have that on our computers. So there's one still in Europe somewhere, and there's one still in Africa, and I think there's 2 in South America, and that is no joke, where we did not get all of them back. We got a significant number of them back. So we recalibrated at all of our buildings, did all of our classroom computer carts. So basically, for people that aren't there, kids can go in, get their computer for the day, and then plug it in, and it's there tomorrow, which is, we've always decided that's the way we've leaned instead of one-on-one computing. Basically for the major reason that when you go one-on-one, from districts that I speak to that are engaged in that, a child might forget it, a child might not have it charged, and then when you need it in the classroom, you still need another classroom set anyway. And then there's the philosophical question of providing computers to everyone, including those that don't necessarily need it. So we've collected them, we put them in. Then we also had an order of laptops that are enabled so that you don't need a separate hotspot or anything, so that a kid can take that home. As we see quarantines, which is what we're talking about more now, so yes, if a teacher and the principal, and this will happen over the coming weeks, they identify kids that need this, yes, we'll provide them with that. The bigger question really, because we're not doing a lot of work remotely now, we're not hybrid, so there's not that same need as there has been in the past. We have sign-outs from the libraries if people need those at home. But now when we get into a quarantine, okay, somebody might need that fast. And so that's where we have a set of them identified, help desk ticket to come in, which has also been changed. We can get that out within a day, within 2 days, out to those families so that when the child's in quarantine, they're able to sign in.
And I'm sorry, because I guess we didn't talk about it. I know we're moving forward. Is that some of the things that were done opening school dates? The thing that stuck out with me is the Bristol Middle School floor replacement of 5 classrooms. It's a brand new, well, for West Hartford, it's a new facility. I was surprised to see that we needed, I don't know if that was in the CIP, I may have missed it, but that just surprises me. There's a life span to those floors, and it's not that young.
Well, we're at 16, 17 years now, so there are some that, because it's only 5, that means it's not a full wing. And I can get that information from Bob with you if it's just wear and tear in one area that needed that. I don't know it off the top of my head, but yeah. You're right. For a long time, we didn't have to do any work at Bristow, and now you're beginning to see that 15 to 20 year cycle of work where there's a little bit, not the same in other areas, certainly, that you've got to do for upkeep.
Ari?
I didn't have a question until we just started talking about the computers. I'm just wondering, now that we no longer have a remote school available, what are the plans for each of the different grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school, for the whole idea of if someone needs to quarantine?
That's a great question. So in a quarantine situation at the secondary level, middle school and high school, they're both the same. The expectation is that the teachers will make available for students the classroom instruction by turning on their Google Meet, basically allowing the students to choose to access in where it makes sense. If, when we were doing a remote school for physical education, we did a lot of hoops to make sure. Now, our physical education teachers will probably say, hey, here's some things you can do, but if I'm out on the field, I'm not actually trying to go through and set all that up so that you can remote in to watch us, perhaps practice passing drills in soccer or something. At the elementary, where kind of remoting in is either developmentally kind of appropriate for the entirety of the day, and all the schedules would be different. What we're doing is we're asking teachers to send home assignments as they make sense that you would normally do when a student is absent, and make your connection with your student as you would. And then what we're trying to do is supplement that with some programmed tutoring from an external tutor. So we've got folks that are identified to provide some tutoring instruction in literacy and mathematics at specific times in the day that would be continuous. So if I'm a second grader, I know that I'm going to get 40 minutes of literacy at, say, 10 o'clock, and 40 minutes of mathematics at 10:45 with a short break in between. That's intended to be a supplement to, not necessarily a replacement or a direct one-on-one, because it's not a remote learning environment. It's a supplement to instruction that might be missed if you're going to be out of school for 5-6 days on quarantine.
One thing to add to that quick is, at the high school and secondary level, it's not a sign-in like last year. It's not a dual class where the teacher's aiming at the kids at home and at the kids in the classroom. The teacher's aiming at the kids in the classroom. In fact, there's no attendance taken because that child's absent that day. The way the State Department of Education wrote the guidelines, that child's absent. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to use those same absences in terms of truancy as you've had in the past, but it's far more of a observing, listening to what's going on. The other element here that's the biggest advantage at the secondary level, a vaccination rate that will approach 90% within 2 weeks once that's completed. We're just going to have far less kids in quarantine at the secondary level. So it's not the same need by numbers as it's been in the past. I think at the one of the things that's important to remember is also the difference between in quarantine because of an exposure and sick. Kids that are sick, we want to get better. And that's one of the things, there is a little bit of the mindset we want to get back to that was before COVID of, you're sick, focus on being healthy, and we can make this up when you come back. We've been doing that for years. We know how to do that, but rest. We don't want you signing in with a fever. We don't want, we want you to take that time to get yourself right and ready to be back and healthy.
Are there different quarantine protocols or anything with vaccinated versus unvaccinated students?
Yeah, at this point, the biggest difference, so vaccinated students that's asymptomatic, they wouldn't have to go into quarantine. The biggest difference at the elementary level and really, well, it's all levels for vaccinated or unvaccinated, is that inside the classroom setting, which means in the classroom, because they've studied transmission in the classroom. So this doesn't apply to P, it doesn't apply to the cafeteria necessarily, it doesn't apply to the bus or bus stops. But in the classroom setting, it's been changed from 6 feet to 3 feet with a mask. So if I'm more than 3 feet from you, and we haven't had more than 15 minutes of exposure immediately with each other, then you're not in quarantine the same way that you were last year. So again, we should see less quarantine from that this year also with that shift. And that's based on CDC. These aren't, one of the things I want to stress, some people have questions about, have I lessened mitigation? We're following the CDC guidance and the State Department of Public Health guidance on this. What they say is what we do.
Liz?
Following up on the, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, following up on the quarantine protocols and letting the kids have a break when they're not feeling well, have we considered a more formalized process of having a note taker or having the teachers provide notes? I know that's being done in some schools or some colleges, so that there's actually notes that the students can receive as part of a process.
So one of the things we're doing, and I think this applies probably mostly to, I would say third grade and up, although second grade's in a transition. One of the, we did make a technology change with second grade this year, where we're looking to provide them with thank you, Chromebooks, senior moment, versus iPads, which they had traditionally had, which enables them access to a Google Classroom. And so it's a process for second grade as that's getting integrated and as they're learning that platform. But we had, basically last year we had the opportunity that everybody got a crash course in Google Classroom if they had never seen it. And so that's one way by which we're asking teachers to maintain their proficiency with that, even though they have all students in front of them, because it's just a great organizational tool. If I've got handouts, if I've got things that I shared in the class that I had to type up on my computer and print out to hand to you as a hard copy, I can attach it just like I would an email, and it's right there for all students, whether they're in quarantine, homesick, or just want to be able to go back to it a week from now to study for the quiz or the test. And so that's certainly a strategy that we are very strongly promoting to make sure that that's happening as frequently as possible. And then that's in addition to, like we said, when students are out, we are asking teachers to maintain, they're out sick. If they're under quarantine, the state is qualifying that as an absence. We're asking them, share work as you would when students are out sick. That doesn't mean they need to have, transcripts of your lessons, but enough. And I think it sort of depends based on the group. At the secondary level, those students can access that instruction. They can go in and see it, and they should be able to keep pace. Although, depending on what their symptoms are, we're telling them, you sort of play that based on your symptoms. And at the elementary level, we're not trying to create a scenario where the kid has to, have the 9 hours or the 6 hours of instruction at home, but they should be doing reading. There may be handouts that the teacher's sending home or emailing to the parent or asking folks to come by and pick up. So we are trying to keep kids engaged if they're in a quarantine in those ways.
Yeah, I was thinking of it more in terms of upper level classes, like a AP science or a calc class, or a class that you'd really, if you're going to be out 7 to 10 days.
I would expect they're going to find that both from their ability to view the class directly if they're asymptomatic, not sick, they're just in quarantine, and or they're going to be able to see things within their Google Classroom. And then when they are sick, sure. I think that's always the case. We don't want to, if I unfortunately get COVID and I'm out of it for 9, 10, 11 days and I'm out of school. Yeah, we work with those students to make sure that we can get them back onto track, whether that's peers, whether that's the teacher directly, whether that's coming back in. We work on an individual basis with kids.
One of the great benefits nationally because of this struggle nationally for advanced placement classes, the highest level. There's AP Daily and AP Classroom for all subjects where it's not just your teacher, but even if I'm fuzzy on some aspect, I'm GDP and macroeconomics, I can actually go and find the lesson of the teacher that did it. And I know for macroeconomics, Janet Yellen went in and taught a class last year. So it's this really cool, things are changing with that in ways that are just very, very interesting. So there's more opportunities for that actually at the upper levels than there would be in some subjects.
Any other questions? Jason?
All right. So I wanted to follow up on part of the summer curriculum portion where you're describing the resource allocation and review for the state curriculum on Black and Latinx studies. And I just wanted to hear more about how that course has gone as someone who's seen the back end on CERC and the development of the curriculum. I'd love to hear how those courses are being implemented and other parts of how what that looks like here in West Hartford.
Sure, and my details tonight will probably be fairly sketchy just because we're so early on.
Yep.
But I'll just, for the sake of other board members, new folks, and people listening at home, West Hartford is involved in the pilot of that curriculum, which is this year. So those materials are, the curriculum itself is newly developed. Our teachers have had professional development over the course of the summer and curriculum writing time themselves to kind of understand what that framework is. We don't get to necessarily deviate from that, but we wanted to provide people with the opportunity to review what the state curriculum documents are. The state did not assign a textbook to that, but they identified a list, and a fairly large, voluminous list of resources that you might acquire. So they had some opportunity to review those resources and to select among them and kind of get their feet wet with what the lesson planning and such is. And so obviously they're just into the first week of instruction on that, and I would anticipate we'd provide you with some more detail on that as it progresses, and talk about the lessons that we've learned and the takeaways as we get a little deep into it. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by Dr. Haskins breaking my technology.
Jason, that'll be a good board presentation at some point later this year with the teachers coming in and some students talking about what we've learned from it.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Any other questions before we go to Dr. Haskins? All right, you're up, Dr. Haskins.
Good evening and welcome back, everyone. It's so nice to start the year with everyone in person, and welcome Avery and Andrew. I'm Dr. Haskins, Roszena Haskins, the Director of Equity Advancement. We have a lot to look forward to this year. We're excited about it. But before I go forward, I would like to just take a quick look back just to provide some context to what we've been up to over the summer and what lies ahead. As you know, we ended last year with the adoption of Educational Equity Board Policy 1800. Thank you for that. It really was an endorsement of our ongoing work for the past several years on building our cultural humility, building our cultural responsiveness and practice, and really building capacity for skills and dispositions among our staff. Last year, we focused largely on physical safety, mental health and awareness and wellness, and social emotional wellness. We centered a specialized program on, learning how to better understand ourselves, developing and building and cultivating a positive personal self-concept, connecting with others, and working together in support of our community goals to be more inclusive, more equitable, and socially just. We paired the competencies of the social-emotional learning framework with social justice education domains of identity, diversity, action, and justice. And we did not do that in silos. We did not do that alone. We did that with multiple stakeholder groups, including our parents as our shoulder partners and other community members, feedback from our students, as well as from our educators, our peers. And so the educational equity policy really was an endorsement and public assurance of our ongoing commitment and our efforts. And it's for some people in the public, it was new, learning and understanding, but it wasn't new work for us, but it has renewed our energy. And so that energy carried over into the summer, and we had a really productive summer. The Office of Equity Advancement, we provided oversight to the SEL, Social Emotional Learning, Social Justice Curriculum Work Groups, and that was led by my colleagues Carrie Jones, Ann McKernan, Scott Ratchford, and Jocelyn Tamburello-Noble, with about 25 educators. I was a little disappointed initially when we didn't have the 50 that we invited because they were committed to the other programs. They were really torn. Like, I had someone call me when I was on the road. How can I do both? I'm passionate about both. And so, they made some choices and they'll stay invested in the work. But what we did was we reviewed multi-stakeholder feedback about the SEL and SJ curriculum, which is an assured experience for those who may be new to this, for all of our students across the district in our morning meeting program and our morning advisory, and at the high school level, it's the community block. We made some process, content, and structural shifts at all three building levels in the curriculum. At the elementary level, we made lesson coherence and depth shifts across and within grades. We introduced a new gender literacy progression, and we did that in collaboration with the Library of Media Specialists and our LGBT Alliance. At the middle school, those shifts in process and content included more depth and new learning. So it was, let's go a little bit deeper and let's spend more time in learning new concepts and topics before shifting to application, before doing it. So we wanted to be more respectful and provide more space for peer-to-peer discussion. We provided consistent frames for integration of heritage months that offered balanced perspective in both historical and cultural context. At the high school level, those shifts were very similar to those of the middle school, but there was more emphasis on building community very early on. An authentic integration of Heritage Month was honored through that revision process. And one structural shift that we're making is building in times during our existing structures for our educators to actually experience what they're expected to deliver. And we spent some time before we dug into the revisions, we did some experiential learning and kind of exploring this journey that we're all on because it's personal, it's sensitive, and it's complex too. And then we also had a team that worked on the professional learning content for LGBT plus topics, which included language, terminology, policy, practice, programs, and resources. And so as we look ahead, we're going to continue our platforms for family and community partnerships. The One Community for Equity network that we established last year, we learned so much from that. We'll continue. We're going to restructure that, re-engage, and really mobilize that platform and look for other structures as well. I'm really excited about the expansion of the Office of Equity Advancement, and I'm just smiling because we're really trying to build a more robust arm of family and school partnership. And so we actually just hired, and she started today, Kayla Lowe. She's our half-time outreach coordinator, and she shared with the ESL department. And I think it's just going to be wonderful, helping us to really reach out to more families, hear more voices, and students as well, those who have traditionally been underrepresented in these conversations and in this work. And so I'll conclude with, I got 2 slides. I'll conclude with just kind of reflecting back on my colleague, Mr. Downey, earlier. He referenced that this is Suicide Prevention Week. And so last night in partnership, we kept our focus on mental health and wellness. We co-hosted this forum, this webinar, with the community of concern, and it included panelists, including our esteemed students who were they were just outstanding. And they discussed how to manage stress related to current uncertainties and provided proactive strategies and guidance for adolescent mental health and wellness and self-care tips for parents and caregivers. This is going to be, the recording will be on our website, our district website and our secondary school websites, along with a compendium of resources too, very practical resources and strategies. We're going to keep these conversations going too because it is so important. We have talked a lot about student mental health, parent self-care, but we can't leave our educators behind. And so we're currently exploring resources and contracted services that support our teachers' mental well-being as well. And just really, they have to be healthy and well and viable in order to be their very, very best for our students, because that's what our students deserve. So we have accomplished so much in a year. We feel good about the direction that we're going. It was a challenging year, and we accomplished a lot. We're not done yet. We're not ready to blow out the candles. We still have so much work to do, but we're appreciative of all the support that we've had from the board, from our community partners, and just the expertise of our students to our student leaders. So, open for any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Dr. Haskins? Avery.
I would just like to begin by saying that I truly appreciate the work that the Department of Equity has done, and I know that my predecessor, Lily, particularly supported the new, the 1800 equity statement for this board, and reflecting the beliefs of the Greater Hall student body, and that we've truly seen the benefits of this program at Hall throughout the past year. This past year has been monumental and challenging, as you've said. I would like to ask, through the community block, students have been engaging in these conversations, and I would like to ask, are there any plans or will there be any talks of the high school students? As we know, high school students are starting to enter leadership in their communities and to take those positions. Will there be any opportunities for these programs to be linked together, of the high schoolers, the middle schoolers? I know that in some of our arts programs and science programs, high schoolers can connect with the younger students and take on that role and continue to build that community. Will that be integrated into this new equity plan?
Absolutely, that is one of, so at Hall High School in particular, there's a startup of the Student Equity and Diversity Council at the middle school. There is also a Students Against Racism group, and so we're looking to really mobilize those students, bring those leadership groups together. We started doing focus groups last year with students, educators, and parents to kind of really hear how we can integrate student voice and give us some direction and guidance. And so we will be looking to provide opportunities for students to really engage in that work more as leaders and consultants to all of us.
Thank you.
And thank you for your feedback.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Other questions? Mark? And then Lorna.
Thanks, Roszena. You said with the professional learning review and redesign with the LBGTQ, the K through 12 workshop. Can you tell us what the K through 3 looks like, and maybe the 4 and 5 grades look like for that in the elementary schools?
When you say the professional development?
Yeah, under the professional learning review and redesign, you said the K to 12 workshops. So I'm wondering what the K to 3 looks like in the 4 to 5.
So, yeah.
Mark, you want to know about the gender identity progression itself?
Well, what you talk about the curricula and protocols and policies. I'm just wondering what it looks like at those younger grades.
So I'll speak to the curriculum.
Speak to the PD.
Yep. So last year we had lessons at the elementary level, and it was really based around I think a read aloud book, and we used the same book at all grade levels, and we got some feedback from staff, from students. Hey, a little bit of a miss in terms of our younger children. So did a lot of great work this summer. Kind of took in feedback that we had, and we developed. And we're talking about this is at least under the gender identity, it's part of the identity unit, and it's one lesson that, you look at identity comprehensively. Who are you as a student? What is your culture? What is your family background? These are all elements, and so gender identity fits into that. At the younger levels, what we're looking at are standards that relate to really identifying stereotypes as they relate to boys and girls. The notion that, because we'll have children, we've talked about this with elementary principals, we'll have children, if a boy wears pink to school, someone's picking on him because, that's not a color that boys wear. So at those younger grades, that's probably the big focus in terms of developmentally, what are students able to understand? Well, we understand there are stereotypes, and we're essentially trying to treat everyone with respect, and for them to understand that a person's identity is their identity. Their likes are their likes, their dislikes are their dislikes, things of that nature. So there's a read aloud component with that, where that's kind of talked about. I know one in the second grade is about a crayon that gets picked on by other crayons because it's not the color that the other crayons like, or something to that nature. And the lesson just is one of more of around tolerance and acceptance of varying points of view. As the students get older in 4th and 5th grade, there's a greater emphasis on identity as it might relate to if it's the gender identity specific part, preferred pronoun, and that's rooted in certainly also within Connecticut. State law recently passed, hey, if a student at any grade level has a preferred pronoun, schools are responsible to utilize that preferred pronoun. So we try to provide education at a young enough age that just makes people aware of it and tolerant of it.
In the professional development piece in my report just kind of highlights how we've been supporting teachers in building understanding, awareness, skills, and shaping dispositions to do this work, because for some teachers it's new learning, a shift in understanding, and so that's really what we've spent the time doing with the professional development, professional learning part of it, supporting our teachers in that work.
Thank you.
Lorna?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Otherwise, I'll just talk like I'm at home. All right. So thank you so much for this information, and I really appreciate hearing you speak about how there's been the process of learning the information before applying it. I think that's a lesson for all of us. We can't just teach at, we have to teach with. And certainly the triad I was hearing in terms of acknowledging the supports needed for the children, the families, but the educators as well. Definitely key, definitely important. What are your thoughts, may I ask you? You made reference to, in terms of wanting, quote, you said authentic integration when you were speaking about the one of these sections in terms of middle school, social emotional, social justice curriculum work group, but all throughout. I imagine that is a theme of authentic integration. And recognizing the purpose for the policy, recognizing the purpose of being equitable, and also the realities that we know outside of this district there are not everyone supports that effort. How, through the process, is there a congruent process of maintaining the focus on the North Star in spite of external stressors, pressures, and condemnation of what we are doing?
One way is through student voice, giving students more time to interact with each other and learn about each other's histories, backgrounds, and experiences. But the way that we open the door to doing that is by letting them see themselves in their histories and their narratives in the context of teaching and learning, to kind of inspire that conversation and inquiries and interest in each other, and then developing some understanding and empathy and acceptance, as Paul talked about as well. When we talk about authentic integration, I think I was referencing like the heritage months too. And some people say, well, why do we have to have these months? And it's because for far too long, a lot of people have not been represented in our curriculum in the context of teaching and learning, right? And so until we can have a more fuller, accurate history and curriculum that reflects all people, we're going to spend time doing that because those are times, those heritage months are times that they're assured, guaranteed, times that everybody gets to hear and understand and learn about people of different cultures, backgrounds, and experiences, right? Until it becomes more natural, right? We'll always celebrate and honor, but then we want it to just be something that's just ingrained in everything that we do in every area of our work, policies, programs, and practice.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that because the integration certainly makes it more than an accessory. This is not an accessory. This is a part of. So thank you so much.
We wanted to really make sure that we weren't reflecting tokenism, and that was a big thing. So more authentically understanding, but part of that for the adults also requires some kind of experiential self-exploration. And providing space for that too, where you can be vulnerable. You can ask questions of your colleagues and not feel like you're going to make a mistake and you're just going to set everything back. So that's the other part of it too.
Thank you.
Other questions? Oh, yes, Andrew.
Is my microphone working?
Yes.
Okay. So I also, circling back to the community blocks, just have a question about that. I know in and out of class I've seen classmates discussing what we talked about in community block and then what's worked and maybe like what could be improved. So I guess I have two questions. One, thus far, how much feedback have you received from students or teachers? And then going forward, is there, because this is like a relatively new initiative, is there a formal infrastructure for feedback?
Yeah, so last year we administered surveys twice, maybe 2 to 4 times at the secondary level for sure. And we also had a structure among our parents, our parent work groups that helped us. They gave their feedback, their perspectives, and helped us to refine. And we took feedback from them. They are parents, they have children at home, and so we got their authentic feedback too, very candid. But we did that through surveys. They were voluntary surveys. The feedback, the response rate was very good, across all levels. Initially, when we first administered it, the response rate was really low. And we understood from students that they were concerned about responding and being honest about it and giving critical feedback and having that submission be tied to their account. So once we, talked about how they could share that feedback in the platform, the portal, and how it was safe and there would be no repercussions for that, and we're not doing that kind of tracking and tracing. We really wanted honest feedback because it's for you, and we want to do better. We want to do well by you. And so we'll continue to do those surveys, but we will build a more robust structure for student feedback, focus group feedback. We started that in the spring at some pilot schools, not specific to the community block. We did have 2 forums at each school for the community block. They were really small. It was a student council, but we learned something from that, and so we'll continue to open up platforms. We're open to hearing other ways, and sometimes it might be better if there isn't an adult in the room, so there can be honest and open conversation. So we want to think about that too.
Great to hear. Thank you. Any other questions? Jason and then Amanda.
All right. A similar comment to what I made with Mr. Vicinus's presentation, that the immense amount of work that you've sustained in the community relations and the process that you've set in place for the development of new ideas, the support of schools, and that the development of a community-supported curriculum. I think that's really admirable, and I would just like to ask for you to reflect on that in terms of what does that look like for other districts? How does what we do in West Hartford compare to other districts in the state in this regard. For efficiency, I also want to give a shout out to my my colleague Richard Jang that you had there. He's been incredible. I'm so glad that you found him. He's a new clinical resident in psychiatry, and a phenomenal addition. So glad you guys found him.
Yeah, I hope everyone could go back and watch it. It was very rich discussion, and I'm most proud of our students for their perspectives. They shared their experiences and their brave voices. I'm just trying to buy more time on answering your first question because it's really hard. It is easy to answer, but it's hard to answer in defense of our humility to answer that question because honestly, we were the only ones in this state, and we're part of a statewide DEI network that was newly started actually by a West Hartford parent who works as a DEI director for another district. And so she reached out and kind of formed this coalition. And we were kind of comparing stories. Also within the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance we belong to, we get to come together as well as a region. And when we were sharing what we were doing, we were the only ones that was, pairing SEL and SJ, social justice, with social emotional learning, those competencies and domains, in this thoughtful way, in an assured way. There were no programs out there for us. We heard the recommendations of all of the reopening schools advisories that you all sat on, and we couldn't go and buy something. So we know our students, we know what they need. We heard from our families, we heard from the advisories. And so we crafted something ourselves. We were thoughtful about it. And then we said, well, we can't, we're so in the trenches, we might have blind spots. And so that's when we invited our families in, and we were particularly interested in making sure that, it represented diversity across, all of the stakeholders. And it was what was supposed to be a 4-day kind of process and relationship turned out to be almost a weekly, in some areas, some building levels, a weekly forum with our families, and it just became a real community, a real sense of community and partnership. We weren't aware of anyone else that was doing it in that way, and our district for the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance, we were actually used as a model for that.
And I do want to say, and this isn't false hubris or anything else. We've got a long way to go. I mean, you think about the UConn faculty in all disciplines, and then have them teach a similar program, because that's what we have to do at our schools.
Right.
Every teacher is in doing this community block. So the lift in getting a continuity, getting the professional development, the understanding is massive to do that across all levels. We can't just take, okay, well, this fits in with what you're doing in history, we're going to have our history teacher do it. That doesn't work. It has to be everybody, which means it has to be this incredible buy-in across not just one school, but across all levels. So it's very hard work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Amanda?
I just wanted to add, last spring we had a lot of interest from the community, and we got letters and we heard in our own interactions. People were very interested in how we approach our work as a district and how we do our planning and what the assessment process is like. So I think this conversation really illustrates part of that process and what it means when we say we're a continuous improvement district, so that we don't have a strategic plan that's static, that we write, we follow, and then we try to write a new one, that there's this constant push and pull of feedback and tweaking and looking ahead. And so for people who are trying to learn more as we go, that's what this looks like. And, when we get to Mr. Ledwith's presentation about HR, we have pages and pages here about the qualifications of our new faculty. And when you think about that augmenting our existing faculty, the fact that we have hundreds of teachers who are almost all our first choice employees in most cases and have been for decades, that they're all the people working in these groups together. The richness of the content expertise that we have in the district is very significant. So to think that, thinking back to the trainings, the professional development day that we had in 2019, when you really dug in and reported back what the faculty had to say about working together and hearing from each other and using each other as content leaders, and how much the faculty liked that model. It's really exciting to think that this summer that kicked into gear again, but with the stamina that everyone needed to pull from to be able to do that work while they were still exhausted themselves. So it really speaks to how West Hartford structures the professional development portion and continuous improvement by adding the support structures for the teachers. So that's not something that I've been hearing from other districts when we're thinking about building support systems, because they take a while to get going. So I'm really glad to hear that. But for people who are trying to pull out how we approach our planning, that's kind of what we're talking about. And it's wonderful to hear your voices clearly engaged as we talk. And that's, when you think about what it means to represent, it's adding a lot of value to our conversations. So I just wanted to make that clear for anyone listening who's trying to think about how we plan and assess, because it is continuous.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, thank you, Dr. Haskins. And next, Ms. Caballero.
Good evening,
Welcome.
everyone. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for my warm welcome, especially this superb executive team who's been so supportive as I get my training wheels off and Gretchen deported. It's been a very exciting and busy summer. Avery, Andrew, welcome. I echo what everybody said. It's been lovely to hear your voices. I appreciate your engagement. I'm Melissa Caballero. I'm the Director of Pupil Services. This is my first summer and my first time here too, so we have something in common. I want to start by sharing some updates from over the summer and tell you a little bit about our plans for the new school year. I want to echo some of Paul and Rosina's work relative to our summer programming. You heard some of Paul's numbers. We had our largest extended school year program to date. We had 374 students participating in our in-person extended school year programming that ran for 6 weeks, Monday through Thursday. And we also had an additional 90 students who benefited from literacy or math tutoring throughout the summer for 4 weeks, and some for beyond, depending on what their individualized needs are. So as Paul said, this is a really big lift in terms of staffing. Many districts had extensive plans for summer programming for students, and I think it really speaks to our teachers' level of dedication that we had 38 certified special education teachers here to support, many of which that are the students' case managers who chose through their dedication to stay on for consistency of programming for our special education students. To make all of this work, we had an additional 18 related service providers that include speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, our assistive technology specialists, our board certified behavior analysts, all supporting our students in our specialized programming. We did house those at 4 different locations. We used our Cogswell building, which is located in our ASD campus. Conard High School, Bristow Middle School, and Whiting Lane Elementary School all served as sites for our extended summer program. And we had 156 non-certified staff members supporting those students based on their individual needs, whether they are paraprofessionals, teaching assistants, or registered behavior technicians over the summer. And so as we look to really kind of support our students in the upcoming school year, we have welcomed 35 new talented colleagues to the Pupil Services Department. Some of those are covering retirees, leaves of absences, and or folks who have moved on, but 8 are new positions that are funded through ESSER to support the social emotional needs or special education needs of students in the academic world. And we have doubled the size of our crisis intervention team. We have Pat Tyler, and we've also hired Shanna Rackmill, who will both support at the high school level as crisis intervention social workers. And we've also doubled the size of our school engagement program, which is housed at Beachland Park. And so that supports students who are having difficulty with anxiety and engagement, and we support them in a non-traditional way to help them at the secondary level in accessing their education and meeting graduation requirements. We are still in the process of hiring team members. At the time of writing, we had a pretty high number of vacancies for our para and TAs. We continue to work and partner with our department supervisors and principals on getting those folks hired. And we have hired 12 more, and we continue to work on partnering with our colleagues to obtain all of those support staff colleagues that are needed for our students. I do want to provide you some updates. We do have some new mandates and changes in special education for the upcoming school year. The last time we met, I just received guidance, I think it was the day before the last board report, relative to this Bureau of Special Education had released information on recovery services for special education. And so what we have done is developed a process aligned with the state guidelines and guidance that they provided that help us identify students who might have had interrupted, delayed, or disruption in their special education services to support them in recovering any lost skills. We actually are quite fortunate in that our district's very responsive in getting students back in really quickly, especially at the elementary level where students' programming was really comprehensive. And then we also had a very robust remote learning experience. So in addition to having full curriculum access, we had full special education and clinical teams supporting in the remote learning center, remote schools. And so while we do identify that there are some students who might require these services, we will be independently looking at who those students might be and how we might support them in recovering any lost skills and regression that might have been as a result of the pandemic. Also, we are anticipating a new special education data system called CT SEDS. It's our new individualized education program software. We currently use Frontline. Parents receive hard copies of their students' IEPs. This new program, CT SEDS, is going to be basically an electronic platform that parents can access independently, and it will be a warehouse of all their student archives. So at this current time, if a parent loses an evaluation for their child that was conducted in 3rd grade and now it's 5th grade and they'd like to look back on that, they can certainly request that from us. We're happy to provide it. But through the new online system, it'll be a data warehouse. Parents will have a login. They'll be able to access all their child's records, their evaluations, any IEPs, any past third-party releases. It looks a lot more streamlined too. We get a lot of feedback from parents relative to our current document that it's hard to read, it's laborious, a lot of jargon. The new format is much more user-friendly. Parents were on the board of development, and I think they really heard their request for it to be a document that's readable, understandable, and accessible. So we're looking forward to that. It is being released next summer. And we do have the state training that will be rolled out in the spring. Currently, there are some districts in Connecticut that are piloting the new program. So as the bugs are worked out and they understand what training is involved, we'll be training all of our staff. There will also be parent forums and opportunities for parents to come in for workshops on how to access the system, what that might look like, and what that will mean for interpreting their child's individualized education plan as we switch to the new system. We also are anticipating new guidelines on specific learning disabilities. These were anticipated to be released this summer, but I think with a lot of the new initiatives coming from the state, I know that the team that was working on it has kind of been wrapping that work up. So I do anticipate at some point during the year we might see these new guidelines rolled out. Certainly keep everybody informed and parents as any communication becomes available or there's any shifts. One of the most critical pieces to our work in special education is our relationships with our parents. Last year, we saw our highest rate of parent engagement and attendance at planning and placement team meetings because we were using the virtual format. We think that really made it accessible for parents to log in from their workplace. They weren't required to take a half day. They could meet with us from their car. They can meet with us from their office, and they didn't need to transition to a school location. So we're going to continue the general practice of having virtual PBTs with the option for in-person PBTs. And I did send a letter out to families communicating all the updates for the start of the school year from Pupil Services, including this option, so that they knew in advance that this is certainly something we're able to accommodate if they'd like to come in. But our goal is to have them there and to participate, so whatever venue is most accessible to them, we're happy to accommodate. Also, we are partnering with SEPTO this year. Our first meeting is at the end of this month on September 29th. We do have a link for membership on our website, and I do encourage parents to attend and join. It's a great resource for families, support, and provides a wealth of opportunities and activities and information for families who have students who have individualized education plans or special needs. I'm also offering my time to discuss and connect with families on special education topics with Coffee with the Director series. I'm offering it 5 times during the year. It's going to be virtual to start because I think that format will work best for parent engagement. It's designed to address more general special education topics, not student-specific concerns. But I do hope that parents will attend, and I think that based on their level of interest or topics, we could kind of steer the conversation to really meet parents' needs. But I think it's important for me to understand what parents see as important topics for them to get information on, what they identify as needs as parents for us to be able to provide them resources. And so I look forward to meeting with them at those times. I want to pause at this moment and ask if you have any questions before I move on to my next slide.
All right. Questions? Oh, Jason.
Likewise, thank you for the work that you've done over the summer, and congratulations on the extended school year participation. And I wanted to ask about the 8 positions that were brought on when and the use of ESSER funds. And I can't recall all the conversations we had before, but were those already discussed as uses of ESSER funds? And does it look like those the resources set aside for special education are adequate given what the planning and preparation that you've done over the summer? Does that still feel adequate?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. And I have to give Gretchen credit for the forethought and planning. I wasn't part of the initial conversations about the allocations of the ESSER funds and kind of came in midstream. We did continue to look at that process together. And so the way that they're set up is it's an increase in both clinical and special education support. And I do feel at this time the teams are having a really positive response to the additional support staff and staffing models. But I think, to Amanda's point, that continuous improvement model of looking at what do our students need as they reacclimate. For many of the students that stayed fully remote over all of last year, many of which had individualized education plans. So the first time they did come back in person was the ESY experience. And so as they reacclimate into a full day, full year, regular in-person program, I think we're going to continue to closely monitor both academic and social emotional progress. And if we feel that we need to revisit additional staffing, we certainly will be monitoring that to determine what interventions are needed and whether that requires additional staffing or additional resources.
Thank you. I'm really curious, and not that you just started with this, but in terms of the Coffee with the Director series, I'm really curious as things move along how that turns and develops. I say that because with you saying how the intent is not student-centered, but more so talking about special education in general. And I wonder how that may, for some parents, allow them to offer questions of reflection of their own experiences. As we know, many times they're latent diagnosis in terms of educational challenges. So thank you for offering that in a more wholesome way, opportunity for parents to engage.
Thank you.
All right. Avery?
I just wanted to shortly ask a follow-up sort of to the Coffee with Director series. I know that at the high school level there's many students with IEPs, any other sort of, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the word, but there's another plan. There's a lot of high school students with IEPs and other sorts of plans that might want to give feedback. Are there any avenues? Would this Coffee with the Director series be open to students as well? Or is there a different avenue which you would prefer students to be communicating their desires to your department?
Avery, I love that thought. I hadn't really thought about students feeling like maybe they'd want to give input, and I really appreciate that idea because I think that would be a great extension. Maybe, that would be a good way for me to poll students to get a sense. I don't know that coffee would be their preferred choice, but maybe there is a format that would elicit some information and feedback to me as a director as how I could support some of our students. And I think the plan you might be referring to is a 504 plan that supports students with accommodations and modifications. But I think that would be important. It's really important that we empower our students to be self-advocates for their programming. And I would love to hear the student voice in that. So I thank you for that great idea.
All right. Do you have another slide
I have
to show
one
us?
more
Excellent.
thing to share with you. And I didn't want to get ahead of myself. So I wanted to be able to answer questions about the department before I moved on to this next exciting piece of information. Before I talk about the store, I just want to start with expressing gratitude. And there's so many people to express gratitude that have had a hand in shaping and creating and lifting the Next Chapter bookstore off the ground, so to speak. Primarily, I want to thank all of you for your support. I want to thank Dr. Andy Morrow, who is not here, and my predecessor, Dr. Gretchen Nelson, for their forward thinking in this beautiful idea. The Next Chapter bookstore, for those of you who are hearing about it for the first time, is a used bookstore that is opening right here on North Main Street for students in our post-secondary program to have a work site to support their ability to generalize work skills and prepare themselves for life beyond graduation. And so you can see in these pictures the completely empty store and the shelves filled with books and our students who've been actively using the site. But before I say more, I really need to thank our community. We hosted a book drive that was supposed to be what we thought a small book swap, hosted by Alana Goldberg and Jillian Puzo, who are two neighborhood book enthusiasts who all have book clubs, and we hosted it here in the auditorium, and it happened on, I think it was June 12th. Well, the community showed up in support. We filled the entire auditorium with books, and it kept our ESY students busy all summer. They spent their literally all summer stacking, sorting, prepping the materials, getting the books ready for the bookstore. We just recently transitioned them over to the bookstore and started filling the shelves by genre. And Rhonda Merriman, who is our department supervisor, Nancy Perot, our store manager. Who else do I want to thank? All of the post-secondary teachers who've supported the job sites, our paraprofessionals and teaching assistants, and Anna, our transition coordinator, Elfenbaum. They've spent countless hours stacking books, unpacking boxes, lifting boxes, and right now our store is almost full, and we still have an additional 50 or 60 boxes full of extra books. So at this time, we are not taking any donations in case the public is interested, but we will certainly keep you posted once we are taking donations again and where to donate those books. We do anticipate an announcement of our grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony, which we would like to schedule in the beginning of October. So more information to come on the opening of our Next Chapter bookstore.
I just am so excited about this, but I don't actually have any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that update. Mr. Ledwith, are you going to read us all of the personnel actions?
Yes, for the next 4 hours.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to our new student representatives. I'm Rick Ledwith. I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources, and I think you're going to have a very exciting year this year, so welcome. And also a welcome to our new Clerk of the Board, Charlotte Flanagan, hiding there in the back, who is taking over for Cammie Rogers, who has served in that role for very admirably for many years, so thank you, and good luck, Cammie, and welcome, Charlotte. I will begin my report with a summary of our summer recruitment results. And our leadership team was very busy this summer as we added 62 new contracted teachers and 26 interim teachers to our certified staff. In addition, we added 3 new administrators to our leadership team. Hiring 90 people in addition to the paraprofessionals and teaching assistants over the course of 8 weeks was no small task. So I really want to take a moment now to thank our leadership team, thank our principals, our department supervisors, assistant principals, the teachers who served on the interview committees for all of their hard work and efforts in bringing us these 90 very talented and dedicated professional teachers to West Hartford. The turnover rate this year was 5.9%. That was up from 3% last year. But if you see, our retirements last year were a record low of 14. And this year they were a record high of 34. So that's what drove the increase in the turnover from 3% up to 6%. We also categorized in exit interviews with our teachers. We find out the reasons why they're leaving West Hartford, and we categorize them into 5 different categories. The one that we really focus on year to year is the number of teachers who are leaving West Hartford to teach in another district in Connecticut. And that number this year was 7. And that number is consistently in that 4 to 5 to 8 range, so 7 was not concerning to us this year. All of our, as Amanda pointed out earlier, most of these candidates were the first choice of our hiring committee, our hiring principal or department supervisor. And they come with a wide range of experiences. 40 of our new colleagues actually worked here last year. So if you remember in our interim teacher meeting that we had in the spring, and we were unfortunately non-renewing those folks, well, we ended up hiring a number of them this year. So 40 of them were either interim teachers, long-term subs, or teaching assistants last year. So they know West Hartford, they know our culture, they know our expectations, so the assimilation should be nice and smooth for them. The rest of the candidates, as I said, come from a wide range of experiences. This year, in comparison to most, we had fewer first-year teachers joining West Hartford Public Schools this year than we typically do. Part of that was purposely based on the pandemic last year, the remote learning experience, all the students coming back into the schools. We hired a number of teachers who did have at least a couple of years teaching experience in another district. And we are proud to say that, yet again, 8 of our new teachers are graduates of West Hartford Public Schools, something we're very proud of. Probably one of the most impressive things about this new cohort of teachers centers around equity, in fact. And almost to a person, this new cohort of teachers are quickly aligning themselves to our educational equity policy, which, as you know, asks us to recruit and retain highly qualified teachers who more closely reflect the diversity of our community and are committed to, or share our commitment to anti-bias and anti-racism. 15 of our new teachers are teachers of color. So we've raised the diversity of our teaching staff from 10% to 11% this year. 4 years ago, we were at 7%. So if we continue this commitment, our leadership team did a great job this year, but we need to continue to build on that every single chance we get when we're hiring new staff, whether it's during the year or when it's during the summer when we have larger opportunities to bring on more staff. Let's see, we had our new teacher orientation on August 26th, which is always a great induction into West Hartford Public Schools. We have a number of speakers who meet with our new teachers who talk about our vision, talk about our mission, talk about our programs like our equity program. Aya Mustafa, who's an English teacher over at King Philip Middle School, helped us to facilitate our program. Our new teachers were welcomed by our Teacher of the Year, Chelsea Smith. We did have 3 Bugby Elementary School students who joined us joined us on film, and actually they joined us virtually to welcome our new teachers and share some of the things that they love about their teachers here in West Hartford, as well as some advice for our new teachers, which is always well received. If I'm not mistaken, a Maglio assisted us in this about 5 or 6 years ago, and I can't remember if it was you, Andrew, or your brother, or your sister. One of the Maglios was we actually have had students from an elementary school join us at every new teacher orientation, and there was a Maglio there a few years ago. We also had Dr. Tracy Wilson join us, who gave a overview of the history of West Hartford Public Schools, and then all of our administrators, as well as Deb Poland and Amanda Aronson, joined us for a luncheon in the auditorium, demonstrating why it's a special place to work here in West Hartford, especially to learn and grow. A couple of other things I'd like to highlight. Our teacher's contract does expire on June 30th of 2022, so we will begin negotiations for that next successor agreement this fall. So actually the first round of negotiations begin next week, and we will meet several times through the month of September and then early October. And then if we're not able to come to an agreement through that process, then we would have a mediation set up for the middle of October. Deb, Amanda, and Liz will be joining our negotiations team, and we're very confident that we will come up with a fair agreement for our teachers that demonstrates the respect and value that we have tremendously for our teachers. And then finally, we did late last week issue our COVID-19 mandated vaccination policy pursuant to Governor Lamont's Executive Order 13D. So by September 27th, it will require all West Hartford Public School employees to be vaccinated. If they're not vaccinated, they will have to have at least had one shot by the 27th, with the second one scheduled shortly after. Now, staff members can opt out of the COVID vaccination policy through exemptions. So they can request a medical exemption, or they could request a religious or spiritual exemption. If they qualify for an exemption, they will be required to submit weekly tests directly to the district in order for them to work throughout their unvaccinated status. So as long as they remain unvaccinated, they will be required to provide us with a weekly negative test in order to work. So that summarizes our school opening report. Be happy to answer any questions that the board had.
Questions for Rick? Mark?
Rick, I understand the religious on the COVID shot.
Yeah.
And I've understand that for many other vaccines and such. But, you know, going through this pandemic, and by no means am I a subject matter expert, but it was something I read, we talked about, I heard, not we, but it was discussed that people that do know that the religious exemption is very, very limited, if almost non-existent for this particular vaccine. So I'm interested in what is that religious exemption, and what surrounds that, because I have conflicting information, not my opinion, of just people that I've and things that I've read. So
we're learning a lot about it, Mark, right now, and it is, we find it more gray than actually more black and white. So it's, the language in the executive order is it's sincerely held religious belief. So what does that mean? So when someone requests a religious exemption, we're going to ask for documentation from a clergy, from a reverend, from a priest, from a pastor, that will provide some kind of context around that exemption.
I think one of the important things to know, there's no major religious denomination that is against vaccinations. People will bring up Christian Science. Christian Science has made a statement not against vaccinations. So this question is eventually, at some point, going to have to be answered in the courts. That's just clear of what's going to happen here, because even when you get the legal advice over it, it's, well, this, well, that, the truth is it's got to be more defined eventually by the courts, is my estimation.
Yeah, because Tom, you're right. The information that I had is that there were, the major religions and even the sub-religions of those. You're right. There's just, so if it's handled in the courts, I'm surprised that it hasn't been handled already, because now we're at more than 18 months on this. So, well, not quite 18 months with the vaccines, but actually not at all. So, but I mean, it's not something that just happened yesterday, right? So,
yeah, 1905 is the major vaccination case that we go back to that says that vaccinations can be mandated. So there's that case that basically supports all of the case law from what you see Biden today to everything from Lamont and beyond. The religious exemption piece, actually, the tests on it are not as specific still. It hasn't gone in front of the Supreme Court in the same way. So that's something that we may see. Because you get conflicting legal advice, in all honesty.
Lorna? What's so funny? Oh, sorry. So thank you, pardon. So yes, thank you very much for this question. You mentioned, and so glad it happens in terms of the exit interviews, and there's like a key area you try to look into. Was there any indication that, and of course not asking for anything specific to be disclosed, but in terms of food for thought for those who did depart, was any of it specifically because of the pandemic related, or was it something else that's food for thought moving forward?
So in terms of the folks that left to work in another district, it had nothing to do with the pandemic. Mostly it was commuting. The district was in their hometown, easier commute. So we did lose a couple teachers who did step back from teaching, at least for the year, and that would have been pandemic related, a couple of those. And then a lot of these retirements, Lorna, were pandemic related. I mean, if you remember our last personnel report, which was in May, I think we were at 27 retirements, if I remember correctly. After that meeting and then through the summer, we received 7 more retirements, which just doesn't happen that late. So I think that was a little bit of pandemic burnout. Yeah.
And they haven't spoken about kind of the bad news part of our hiring yet, but there is bad news, is that there's more competition for opening, because districts have openings, because this isn't unique to West Hartford. There were huge numbers of retirements in Connecticut. And that is a fraction of what happened nationally, the teaching pool. So there's that issue. But as you know, when I mentioned it with bus drivers, there's also certain pools that we're competing over. Special education right now, with the focus on social emotional learning that's happened across the state and the use of ESSER funds, it's incredibly competitive to get candidates right now. It's really difficult. Paraprofessionals, it's really difficult to get people to do that work right now. Teaching assistants, it's really difficult to get people to do that work right now. Bus drivers, cafeteria workers, all those areas, the employment, we have posted, we've recruited, we've done that work. But gosh, if you know somebody that wants to work for West Hartford Public Schools, now's the time to tell them to put in an application. And certainly Melissa's department has hit the hardest with that, just because it's got the largest need. And so when we can't fill those positions, from bus monitors to classroom aides to teachers, social workers, that's an impact on our kids, and we're fighting hard to fill those. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, couldn't agree more. It's those level of positions where it's not just West, and it's across the state. We're all struggling hiring paraprofessionals, teaching assistants, cafeteria workers. So folks in that lower tier, unfortunately, have to say that the lower tier salary wage positions, we're not getting the applications. The folks aren't coming out to work. We do have. We just heard about some flexibilities that the state allowed us to take advantage of last year. They held off on allowing us to take advantage of them this year, but we just got word yesterday that we can. So I think that will help a little bit with our teaching assistants and paraprofessionals. And we have a little bit of work to do, I think, with our paraprofessional contract. We had several folks that we offered positions this year, and they were coming in with experience, but in our para contract, they have to start at step 1. so they weren't willing to take a pay cut to come here and work in this role, even though it has outstanding benefits. So there's a couple things that we can continue to work on to improve that.
And that's, you know, we hire paras and teaching assistants as a feeder for people that didn't get a job yet, that are looking to go in, and they can prove themselves here. We get to know them, they work as substitutes, and then they're an interim employee, and then they get hired here, and it's great, and they've come up in our system. But this year there were jobs out there for them, so that's the other competing piece of this.
Liz and then Amanda.
I was noticing, Rick, that there was a bunch of, on the interim teachers, a bunch of retired teachers that you hired. Is that typical, or is that kind of unique to?
It is. We will, a good question. We generally will bring back a couple of retired teachers this year. We went a little deeper this year because we were struggling finding some special ed teachers this year, to Tom's point. So we, again, a couple. This year it was a little bit more than that. Yeah. But it's great. You know, you're bringing them back. They just left. They, you know, grew up here, taught here for 30 years and understand us and our culture. And this year it's great to have them back.
Are we covered for the bus drivers for the athletic part of the day? Because I heard some of the coaches saying they had some concerns about whether they had enough drivers for the buses. So I'm just wondering, are we able to get the kids to the away games and do what we've hoped to do with the schedules?
Yeah, that hasn't been a problem. We've talked to that bus company, because it's actually separate companies. That's not First Student. Or wait, no, yeah.
First Student does do
First Student
athletic.
does that. That's the separate space. So we don't have an issue there at this point, but it's something we worry about during the year and after the vaccination policy takes place. If there are less drivers, that could be a factor.
Okay. I think there might be some confusion on that. So that's the only thing that
There's
would
often
be good
confusion
to clear up.
there's with the larger sports like cross country and everything else. There's just the number of people sometimes can be an issue, where it's not that you can't get a bus there. It's a question of, can you get 5 buses there? Do you do different things during that? So that could be the
It wasn't that sport. I was thinking, so that was just one thing that maybe there's just, you know, with parents getting that message that we might just want to clear that up. So if we are, so I just wanted to see if we are covered for the athletic transportation needs that we've identified. So it sounds like
And
we are.
again, those aren't our employees. Those are employees of First Student, and they've just been a great partner getting those positions filled and really meeting the needs of the district.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Also reading your report, was really pleased to hear about the hiring of teachers of color, and that has met a board goal for the district. And I'm wondering if you can attribute that to particular strategies or particular policies to recruit teachers, or the programs that you listed here and the partners. Was there something that clicked this year, or was it a product of the labor market, product of the connections that were established during the pandemic, or during the previous year? And if those are patterns that led to those hires, is that something we can continue? Is that a way of reproducing that outcome? Or is this, we don't know what led to a greater diverse pool of applicants, but I would love to know if there's a particular policy or strategy that really helped out, or you saw that generate greater higher quality applicants and a more diverse pool.
I think it's a great question, Jason. I think it's a combination of everything that we're doing. So I don't think this was lightning in a bottle that happened this year. It's been something that we've been working on collectively as a district for a number of years now. And certainly adding Rosina's position several years ago is a catalyst to some of this positive change that we're seeing. This wasn't just this past year. We're like 3-4 years in now of building on going from 7% to 11%. And a combination of all of these programs. I mean, you look at the Future Educators of Diversity. I mean, that's something you're starting to see around the state now more. They're popping up everywhere, but it started here. And that's going to generate even a more stronger future pipeline of educators right here in West Hartford by bringing when I talk about our kids graduating from West Hartford and coming back to teach here, that's a core group that we'd like to focus in on as well. Our association with CREC has paid dividends for the last couple of years. A number of the candidates in this pool this year came out of the CREC Minority Teacher Recruitment Fair. We've been set to go to the historically black colleges and universities career fair the last 2 years. That's been canceled because of the pandemic, but hopefully that will be back on our calendars for the spring. And we can get down there and start to look at different parts of the country and talk about what we're doing here in West Hartford. And I think we're really starting to create that brand of what we're really about. I think people outside of West Hartford don't realize the true type of community that we are, how diverse we truly are. I think people who live outside of West Hartford drive into West Hartford, see Blueback Square, see the center, and they think we're this affluent white community, and we all know that's not who we are. So that brand is starting to get out there as well, and people are starting to notice West Hartford more. So we'll keep building on what we've been doing and adding and growing.
Mark?
Rick, have we seen any headway with the program that we have at Central Connecticut State University? Has that dividends, have they paid off yet on having students in that program go through there?
So we've had, what are we, up to like 30 students now? I should have done the research before tonight.
Well, last year we had a number of students come back to really help us out as teaching assistants and substitutes. And so looking forward to working on their certification so that they can come back and interview and we can hire them as full-time staff.
Yeah, it should start paying off at the end of this year based on the timeline.
Yeah.
And then we'll be having, each year we have a core group of students.
That's what I was just going to ask about the maturity of the programs. I wasn't sure whether it was now or next year, because I knew it was
That
close.
is like year 4, right now? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I'm good. Sure? Yeah, no, positive.
Thank you so much, and on behalf of the board, I just want to thank you for all the hard work you did in bringing all those new teachers on board. I can say I came for the new teacher luncheon and didn't realize we were going to have 80 new staff members in addition to all the administrators, and I ended up having to park basically in Farmington in order to get into town hall that day. It was really nice to see such a diverse group of faces and people in the room, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you on behalf of the entire team.
One quick question. Do we happen to know yet, or I suspect we may not know yet, what percentage of our teachers and staff are fully vaccinated?
We will know specifically in the next couple of weeks. Because we ran our own clinics in the spring, and actually right now I can start to see who's been vaccinated in other clinics. So doing some extrapolation of that data, I'm estimating we're probably about 90% of our staff is vaccinated, which is, I think, outstanding.
We're definitely over 90% of our teaching staff when we look at it overall, but we'll have more data by the 20th, I think, is the end of it coming in.
24th. Yeah.
24th.
Great, and we had a clinic today, and we have another one coming up at the end of the month as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I know that mandate is potentially in flux if the governor's emergency powers expire at the end of this month, but we'll be keeping an eye on that, and there could be news coming in from the federal government as well.
So
Yeah, we heard
I
today
suspect
that
we'll hear some more about that.
the federal government is going to mandate that all of their employees across the country be vaccinated, and with no exemption is what I'm hearing. I heard today that there won't be a...
The vaccine requirement isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, I think people just have to accept that, because if it did go somewhere into the governor's orders, we would bring it up at the board table and request it to go forward.
I think what I was referencing on the federal level was the
100
potential for OSHA to issue a requirement for all employers with 100 or more employees
Yeah,
to require vaccination, and I think we would fit under that requirement.
It's a clarification if it's business, though. That's the one, they use the word business, so I'm trying to get more information legally about that, but you're right. So with all of those things in place, it's not going away September 30th. We know that.
Thank you. Anyone else for Rick? Or should we move on to Liz Hewitt? Welcome, Liz.
Thank you very much. Good evening. The last item that we have for you tonight is a brief snapshot of our first day of school enrollments. There is the report that I put together in the book, and then I distributed to each of you at your seat a copy of our by school, by grade, by section enrollment report. As you may recall, when we presented the long-term enrollment projections last January, we were really unsure as to what effect the pandemic was going to have on our enrollment. We had lower enrollment than anticipated last year, and we were not sure if that was going to be a one-year dip or if that was going to really reset our base as we calculate our projections. So at that time, we had projected that we were going to have 8,675 K-12 students. And on the first day of school, we actually had 8,805, or 130 more than we had projected. At the middle school and the high school level, we really came in at projections, some variances between schools, between grades, but really right on. Where we really saw our variance was at the elementary school level. We have 118 more students at an elementary level than we had anticipated. And we're seeing variances at each school, at each grade, but it's really a large variance in the first grade, where we have 35 more students than anticipated, and in kindergarten, where we currently have 29 students more than anticipated, but still have students who are completing their enrollment, so we do expect that that number will increase. We had planned to have 203 sections of elementary, but based on the numbers, we had to break a couple of sections, so we currently have 206 elementary sections. That ends up being an average class size of 18.7 students, and all of our sections are within class size guidelines. We certainly were trying to limit the size of classes given the pandemic and our desire to have students maintain the appropriate distance, and I believe that we're doing that, but the classes are a little larger than we had anticipated based on the actual enrollment. As you know, this is really just a snapshot. The numbers change during the month of September, and we do our official enrollment on October 1st. Typically, we have a change of 30 to 50 students each year. We generally lose students at the secondary level, but gain at the elementary. So that may be a challenge for us, but we will certainly address that and place students as needed as they continue to enroll. But based on the October 1st numbers, we'll have a final and official report for you at the end of October on our official numbers, our official class sizes, our official sections.
So, just to add, thanks, Liz. There are areas that we've capped. You look at Whiting Lane second grade, Wolcott second grade, Wolcott fifth grade, where anybody moving in at this point, we're placing at another adjoining school close by, and we'll talk to those families individually. We did the same thing last year to try to keep classes small. You'll see Wolcott certainly has the biggest two sections that we've got in the district. The issue with Wolcott is we can't break into another classroom. They have no classroom space left. So Wolcott, it's either put on a portable after we took off the portables, and I don't want anybody to think, oh, you were short-sighted taking those portables off. The fire inspector made us take those portables off. Or we look at a spot redistricting, which we've done in the past, from one street to another school in the coming years. We did that before with Webb Hill when we had a boom at one point. And that's something we could be looking at, frankly, with the way Wolcott space is right now, because there's no extra space there right now.
Any questions? Mark?
Liz, I don't know, my memory, I guess, isn't as good as it used to be, but wasn't it a year or two ago, we had like 9,300, 91 to 9,300? Did we drop that many?
Well, this report focuses on our K to 12 population. So if we look at all of our grades and also include in-district students but who are outplaced, we're currently at 9,200. So yes, we are seeing a drop, but that's the 9,300 number that you're referring to.
You're thinking with pre-K?
So it has pre-K
I guess,
in it.
maybe, but that's the number, how many students we have, you know, when we look at, when we look at our budget, it's 93.
Yeah, and
It is.
that's what we would look at this year with pre-K. We'll be at 9250. We'll be in that ballpark at
Okay.
pre-K because we also include outplaced students.
So the memory's
are
not
in
that
the
bad.
district.
It is not that bad, Mark. And in
No.
fact,
I
our
come here to reassure myself sometimes.
And in fact, our pre-K population is actually going up. As we discussed at one of our meetings, we were the recipient of a Smart Start grant, an additional one, and so we've added 2 pre-K classrooms at Webb Hill this year.
So the move-ins are, there's a function of, okay, we held our kids out of kindergarten last year, but the way you see it spread across the elementary school, and in certain areas where it's home sales. We've had young families move in. We know that. You've seen the real estate market in town. We had 9 families in one school come forward after one busy weekend of home sales, adding kids in August. And this is kind of the classic West Hartford. We're kind of going back to a few years ago, and you know, we've talked before about the baby boom and then the boomlet and this moving, because West Hartford, it's not a direct coefficient between births because people move to West Hartford once they've had kids for our schools. And the evidence of that is middle school is steady because people don't tend to pull their kids out of their school in middle school. High school, same thing. The area Chip was off, which I've called him about many times this summer, was elementary school. And it has to do with the move-ins and the home turnover.
Yeah. And to that point, I did go back and look for those students who would be in kindergarten this year. I looked at the birth rate 5 years ago. There were 596 students or children born 5 years ago, but our kindergarten population at this moment is 635 and probably growing a little bit.
And it's usually about a 95% coefficient rate, so it's usually lower than that number, and we're significantly higher.
Great. Any other questions? Jason?
Yeah, thank you for the report. I'm wondering, what does school choice enrollments look like for this year?
The open choice enrollments?
Open choice, thank you.
No, that's okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I was answering the question. So they look good this year. Roszena might be able to talk about it in a little more detail, but we saw that our students have come back. We haven't lost many students. In the kindergarten level, we had opened 20 spots. 14 of them are filled and 6 others are in process, finishing the registration. I do think that the correct schools overall have experienced some enrollment challenges, but our students seem to be returning and committed and doing well.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to jump in, Roszena, but there's less demand in open choice from students from Hartford. Is that a reflection of busing? That's a significant question. We've regained, we talked last year about those students that we lost that we couldn't identify. We've regained a lot of those students clearly this year. The cities I'm worried about. I don't know if they've had that same numbers, but I did check because we're 6 students short right now, Roszena.
It's very unusual. Usually at this time, we're being asked by the state and by CREC if we will open more seats, if we can find more seats. Typically, this would be the end of all of the lottery rounds. We're in round 6. Normally, we're in round 10 by the end of July. We're just in round 6. So at this point, many students have already started schools in their home, in their neighborhood. They've bought uniforms. And so it's going to be tough to fill those seats. And then transportation, having to, manage the routes again. And I will add that generally, we're about 97% of our students that start with us graduate from our high schools. And there's a small percentage, maybe 1.5% of our students that move out of the open choice program because they move into West Hartford.
That shortage here it's not a West Hartford reflection. We actually have a higher fill rate than many of the neighboring communities that have asked for more open choice students.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you all so very much. We will move to staff reports and board discussions. I think we've pretty much covered that. And moving to routine matters, approval of the minutes. There's a recommendation to approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of June 1st. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Amanda Aronson.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a second?
Second, Ari Steinberg.
Thank you, Ari. Any discussion of the minutes, the draft minutes? If not, I will try your minds. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the June 1st regular board meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Moving to information and reports. Board members, communications and reports. Are there any reports from other boards and organizations? Any other information and discussions? Non-staff communications and reports. Reports from student board representatives, and we'll start with Avery. Welcome, Avery.
Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to begin with some acknowledgements. I think that I can speak for the Hall student body to say that Hall has seen many struggles over this past year, but we've also seen many successes. And we have our administration, our faculty, our families, our peers, our teachers to thank for all of that. This year, students return to the traditional eight-period schedule, and students are participating in community lessons, as we previously discussed, to promote the social justice and social and emotional learning objectives. And after-school clubs and activities are being held in person once again. Hall is having a free vaccination clinic for students and staff on September 9th and September 30th, open from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Students and staff can receive their COVID-19 vaccination on a walk-in basis. The counseling office continues to support seniors in their transition beyond high school with the upcoming Senior Day. Grade 12 students will spend 2 class periods on September 15th to prepare for life after high school with their school counselor. Hall's Black Box Theater has begun preparations for the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which is the school's first musical in over 60 years. And if you may recall, this play was also supposed to be performed in 2020 and was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's one thing to be excited for. And all fall sports begin August 26th. Good luck to our hardworking student athletes as fall contests begin this month.
Thank you. Andrew, how are things over at Conard?
Many of the things Avery mentioned are the same at Conard. We return to the 8-period day, as you all know. But I'll add that just reflecting and contrasting last year with this year, I definitely feel personally that there's a different atmosphere this year, even though we still have all of the risk mitigation strategies, and from what I've seen and heard, they seem to be working very well, and everyone's following them. But at least in my classes, kids are talking more, interacting more, and generally it's a more collaborative environment, so that's definitely something I enjoy and I'm looking forward to throughout the rest of the year. Like at Hall, sports are starting again, clubs are starting again. A number of sports teams, varsity, JV, field hockey, boys soccer, girls soccer, all had games today, home and away. And clubs are starting as well as we make preparations for student council elections, and a number of other clubs have been hosting their first meetings this week and will next week. Looking forward to the future, college representatives are going to be coming physically in person this year to meet with students, something that was made virtual last year due to the pandemic, but that will be nice for seniors to be able to talk directly to the admissions officers as they make preparations to apply. and we also had a freshman orientation in August, which was very successful. There was an ice cream truck, which was a good success as well. But everything at Connors seems to be going pretty well, and I'm looking forward to the year.
Thank you, and we are as well. Looking forward to having both of you participate this year with us. Future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Our next 3 meetings are Tuesday, September 21st, Tuesday, October 5th, and Tuesday, October 19th, all right here in this room at 7 p.m. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Are there any comments from visitors? No. Before we close out, I just wanted to thank Cammie for her 5 years of service to our board. And welcome to Charlotte, and we are looking forward to stymieing you with long meetings like this one. So, and if you have any questions, I'm sure Amanda will be happy to work with you to get everything straightened out with that. We do not have an executive session, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mark. Any
Second,
second? Second by Jason. Meeting is adjourned at whatever time that says. 9:36 p.m. Thank you.